we're in a new location for interviews, and this is my first time meeting this gentleman, Tommy Castro. My name is George Ingmeyer, and coming out of New Orleans. I could just veer off for a second because I know that you recorded a song that I think of New Orleans, Mojo Hannah, with,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
with Marcia Ball.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I mean, it's a classic song, so I mean,
Yeah,
this might be a weird place to start the interview, but it's something I just came across earlier today, and I was like, this is the Mojo Hannah, and you're with Long Tall Marcia Ball, so that had to be an interesting...
Well, you want me to give you a little
Please.
story on that? Because it is kind of interesting. I did this legendary rhythm and blues review show. Some acts from the Blues Cruise. Got them, a couple of other artists to come with me on tour. We started this thing, and then we did it a few times with it, rotating the lineup. And one of those lineups had Geneva Magnus on it, and we were going to do a song with her. She's just kicking around ideas for what song was going to wind up on the record, and she said, there's this really cool song I'm thinking of doing called Mojo Hannah. It's just really great. But we never did it. She didn't do it. I didn't do it. And then this album, The Devil You Know, was being put together. And I got wind that Marcia was going to be coming through the Bay Area where we were recording. And I remembered that song, and I go, man, that would be a good song for me and Marcia, So that's exactly what happened. She came through town, she came in the studio, and we knocked that out, and it was such a great combination of influences and music, but, what a perfect person to do that song with me.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned review. There's
Yeah.
this whole story, aside from your interesting path as an individual, doing
Yeah.
blues review, and just could you, to the uninformed, and I would count myself among them, what's a blues review?
Well,
Or what is this blues review in particular?
Well, back in the day, there would be these great shows that went out on the road where they'd have one backup band, I remember Jimmy Reed has a song, and he's talking about he's doing a little talking before the song plays, and he's talking to, well, I remember I was on tour, and they had a Erskine Hawkins band was backing everybody, and it was real common that there would be a backup band that backed up several artists, and sometimes it was a soul R&B review or a blues, bunch of blues cats, and so that kind of thing went by the wayside. You don't see it very often anymore. And I was on the Blues Cruise, and everybody was jamming late at night, and I realized that the audience loved it when all the different people got together to jam. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I took a show on the road, bring a couple of other artists with me and my band, like the old reviews used to do, and then at the end of the night, we'll all get together and jam. And that went really well for a while. It was kind of we did it for, probably over a period of 5 years. We did a few tours that way, and we had Ronnie Baker Brooks, Deanna Bogart, Magic Dick from the Jay Giles Band. We've had, like I said, Geneva Magnus, Sister Monica Parker. We had Michael Burks on one time before he passed, and Bernard Allison, and let me think. I think Danielle Nicole and Samantha Fish also played on our review at one time. And so we just kind of kept changing up the lineup and did it for as long as we could. It was interesting times, and we did a couple albums of that. One's called Command Performance. That was the first group, the original group. And then another one called Tommy Castro Presents Legendary Rhythm and Blues Review Live. Yeah, Rick Estrin, and also wound up Theodis Ely was on there. God, so many people when I think about it,
But it kind of began, this chapter began by being on the Blues Cruise and just seeing how it works Now, the Blues Cruise itself is a whole different ecosystem than
Yeah.
anything else,
Yeah.
like the going on the road. And I was listening to an interview you were giving, and I found it fascinating because I think you were just talking about how it's like not you got to get to this right now because there's kind of an ebb and flow on the boat that allows you to enjoy the music in a different way than you do anywhere else, in terms of being able to catch the music when you're catching it, when it's happening, how people are interacting.
Yeah, it's different than anything else I've ever experienced. It's a great way to do it because well, everybody has some accommodations on the boat, right? So you can go to see 4 or 5 shows that night or that day, stay out as late as you want, you know, party all you want, and you get up when you want, and you just catch the. You have plenty of time throughout the week to see all the shows you want to see. And there's 35 bands, 35 acts, all the way from, you know, Taj Mahal and Keb' and Buddy Guy. They had Bobby Bland on board and Etta James before they passed away. I mean, it's really been an amazing experience for me going on those cruises, and I've been on about 32 or 3 of them now. It's done a lot for my career. I have a career, you know, so many friendships, you know, and collaborations came out of that. You know, I start to work with people and write songs with people that I met and became friends with in that environment, because normally we pass each other like today. You know, my friends at Southern Avenue, we know each other from the Blues Cruise, you know, but in a festival setting, I might not even know them very well. We would just be another band on the bill. I'd say hi to them. They'd say, hi, hey, how you doing? And we'd pass like ships in the night and never really get to spend much time together. So anyway, I could go on and on about that. That's probably good, though.
I found that really fascinating. But now taking it to going on the road, let's go back to when you were listening to early records. I imagine B.B. King was like one of those records you were listening to.
Yeah.
Then fast forward to what, early 2000-ish?
Yeah.
You toured with B.B.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow. I still can't believe it. So you know, like a lot of guys my age, started out listening to rock and roll radio, and at that time, I was around when AM radio was what most people listened to, and then it kind of switched over to FM radio at some point. And when they switched over to FM, the cool thing about FM radio is they didn't have as many commercials. They didn't have as many sponsors. I mean, it was it was kind of new territory, and the DJs could play whatever they wanted. So they could put Albert King 18-minute long version of Blues Power from Live at the Fillmore, and you could hear stuff like that. And they would play all kinds of cool blues along with the, you know, folk music and rock and roll and psychedelic stuff and heavy metal. All of that stuff was being played on these certain rock and roll radio stations. But that's where I got turned on to, you know, Taj Mahal and Alvin Bishop, you know, some of the guys that were active on the scene at the time. Michael Bloomfield was an influence early on, Johnny Winter. And then I started going, well, Johnny Winter, well, he's like Muddy Waters is his influence. You know, he's getting everything from guys like Muddy. And then I listen to Bloomfield. I go, well, man, he's getting a lot of his stuff from B.B. King. And you know, and it went. And then I listened to you know, Steve Winwood or somebody like that, and I think, wow, but he's getting his. He sounds. If you listen to Ray Charles, you can see where he's coming from. And so I kind of, me and a lot of guys like me, traced the music back as far as we could, you know, and I'm still enjoying that because every now and then somebody will hip you to something you don't know anything about. And one more thing about that, you know, my one of the bands that I got in when I finally decided to take a shot at making a living making music, it's a long story, but I got to this point where I realized that this is what I was meant to do. And if it meant that I was going to be scraping along, and if I was going to be, you know, relatively poor the rest of my life and be happy playing music, that I was going to give it. I was going to take a shot at it. I made that decision, and I wound up getting a gig with a what they call a blue-eyed soul band out of San Francisco, and the leader of the band, Big Walter Shufflesworth, he went by, a good name for a drummer, and he would. We didn't have internet, you know. We didn't have cell phones. All we had was a paperback book, maybe to read in the van, crossing the country. And one of the first things he handed me a copy of a book called Sweet Soul Music. He goes, "This is required reading for the band." So I read that book a little bit, but mostly we'd listen to this collection of 90-minute cassette tapes that he had custom made from his record collection. And he'd been collecting records since the early 60s, you know, and that's all he did. Every town we went to, he'd go to record stores and collect. And so I got turned on to so many artists and so many songs and so much music that I didn't know about. I got my education touring with a band called the Dynatones, and that was where I met Randy, my bass player. And now, fast forward, the two of us have been working together for 30 years. There he is now. He's spying on me. Oh my God. So, yeah. Did I lose my train of thought again?
No. This is why we're up here. You were talking about basically listening to a mixtape on the road, but
custom-made 90-minute tapes where he would vary the styles of music. It wasn't all R&B and all heavy, funky blues.
Now, were you a truck driver at some point?
I had a day job where I drove all day.
Is there a story connecting driving a truck and listening to music and kind of singing along?
That's how I learned how to sing. Well, when I was growing up, people in my neighborhood, nobody. I mean, there was a few guys that had a guitar, or they might have a couple guys had guitars. One guy had a bass. Drummers were hard to come by, but nobody was getting music lessons. We were just figuring it out by listening to records and trading what we learned with each other. So we learned how to that's how we learned how to play, and I got in a couple garage bands, a couple bands that were playing blues in garages around the neighborhood. And later on, I started getting, had a couple bands that would actually get some gigs in a bar or a nightclub or something like that. And we'd have band practice and we have songs to learn. So during the day, I would be driving around delivering dry cleaning, basically, for my uncle's cleaners. And I'd be driving all day long, and I'm listening to mixtapes that another friend of mine had made for me early on. And Little Richard, Ray Charles, Fats Domino, Wilson Pickett, Otis Redding, B.B. King, Buddy Guy, Guitar Slim. I mean, I got to sing along with all these songs that I like, and that was the closest thing I got to any education on, any vocal training. And later on, I worked with. I was living with one of my ex-wives was a singer, and she was a properly trained singer, and she would teach me a few things, a few tricks, a little tips here and there, but never took any formal lessons. And you've probably noticed that.
But it began with the guitar, and I understand your mother was supportive of both you and your brother's music, and which included purchasing guitars and amps for you guys. I mean, how did that work out when you guys were actually playing in the house and
Well, my brother was 6 years older than me, and he was one of those guys that always thought of he was the first guy to think of everything in my neighborhood. He was just one of those guys. But he didn't stick with anything. He kind of kept on. He'd get into something, and then he'd do it for a while, and then he'd move on to something else, But he did play guitar for quite a while. He was in a couple of bands that played at the pizza parlor or played the teen dances and stuff like that. And they were really good. These guys would play songs just like the records, just like the record would sound. They were doing the Doors, or they'd be doing the Stones or the Beatles, anything like that. And they would often rehearse at my mother's house. And so that's where I got the bug, That's where I kind of got interested in playing. And when he wasn't looking, I'd take his guitar and play it when he was gone. And after a while, he figured out that I was doing that. And he would say, "Hey, Tommy, I'll show you a song if you wash my car." And I'd say, "Hell yes, that's a good deal." So I'd learn a song and I'd wash the car, and he'd say, "Hey, I'll show you a couple of chords if you shine my Beatle boots." So that's that's how that got started. Eventually, I got my own guitar, and that's to your question. My mother worked, minimum wage jobs and stuff like that. It was kind of a struggle. And when you're a kid, sometimes you don't realize how difficult your parent has it, and you're just like, I want a guitar. I want to play guitar. I need a guitar of my own, And she managed to get me a guitar.
What kind of guitar?
When I was about 10 years old. Oh, well, the first one was like one of these big, fat Harmony acoustic guitars with the F-holes, and the strings were giant. And I was 10 years old, and my fingers could not press the damn strings
you
down.
could dry laundry on these things and stuff.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
it's really
yeah.
hard to play. Yeah. My brother's guitar, he had like a Rickenbacker, really sweet, easy, nice, smooth fretboard and neck, and the guitar strings were
Really bright sounding too, as I recall. I mean, those are great.
Well, it was easy to play, a lot
Yeah.
easier than mine. And I knew there was a big difference between mine and his, and I kept squawking about it until I finally got myself a little electric guitar, and then we went on from there. Next thing I needed was an amplifier, and that was kind of a big deal. But, I used to work. I would have a paper route. I would mow lawns. I would go do some work around my uncle's cleaners when I was a little kid to help pay for things, But I guess the point of it all is as poor as we were, my mother would find a way, because she knew I loved it so much, and it made me happy. What made me happy was ice cream and cookies and stuff like that. So I was a fat kid.
You turned out okay. You look like you.
I learned how to eat later on in life, but at the time she would do things that would make me happy, that was within her, that she was able to do and manage sometimes. But I look back and think, how hard was it for her to come up with, maybe $300 to buy an amplifier for me when I was that age. And later on, I kind of felt bad about it because I was had such a strong desire to play and have my own equipment, that I wouldn't stop talking about it until I finally got one.
Well, she encouraged something that continues to impact the world because of your music and your touring and all that. So I think it paid off, right?
Oh yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mom.
Now, there's a bar called JJ's, and I couldn't figure out if it was in San Jose or San Francisco.
San Jose.
But I was listening. Some of the people that I saw, you said John Lee Hooker,
Yep.
Buddy Guy,
Yep.
Albert King, Junior Well. I mean, but
Yep.
it was like a pizza place, right? Kind of like, or it was basically in a strip mall, right?
It was in a little strip mall.
Well,
Something's going on. Yeah. So, anyways, a little. You know how those little strip malls are. You might have a tool shop over here, and there's maybe some kind of a little restaurant over here. And this little space was a bar. All it was a bar. It's similar to the bars you would see in Chicago. Just a shotgun type thing where it's long and not very wide. And they had a little stage in the corner by the front door. And this guy, he had a bar. He started having started having barbecue and blues on Sunday afternoons. That was it. Just Sunday afternoon, barbecue up some stuff out in the parking lot, and have a blues band play because he liked blues. And it wasn't very popular yet, but he liked it, and so he did it. And pretty soon it became Saturday night, Friday night, and eventually every night of the week there was a blues band in that place. And it gave us all a place to play, gather, jam, and they would bring in acts on the road because in those days, Buddy Guy was. I saw Buddy Guy and Junior Wells come out of a van and go into JJ's Blues Bar. It holds less than 100 people. And they got up and played their ass off that night. We had a whole lot of fun. I saw Albert King in that little place, and he's such a big man, he had to set up on the floor. He had his band on the stage, but he got down on the floor and played because he couldn't, he was too tall, I think. From the stage to the ceiling, it was, anyway, I can't believe all of that actually happened. But that's what, it also gave me a chance to, meet some other players and got into some local bands there.
Then you made your way up to San Francisco, and I know busking was kind of it didn't work out that well for you.
Well, you really have done your homework, haven't you?
A little bit. But
he knows more about me than me.
But there was a music scene happening in San Francisco at that point that I'm imagining was really impactful on the way you thought about what music was and what music could be for you as a performer, because there was just so much happening.
Yeah. Well, when I made the decision to try playing music full time, I moved from San Jose to San Francisco because it's a bigger city, and there were little blues joints all over town. What was happening is in the 90s, blues was becoming more and more popular. They were playing it on the radio. They were playing Robert Cray on the radio. They were playing ZZ Top on the radio. They were playing Bonnie Raitt on the radio. You'd hear, I'm trying to think of the kind of stuff that would make it onto mainstream adult rock radio at that time. And there was a big club in San Francisco that had opened up called Slim's. And it was owned by Boss Skaggs and the manager of Huey Lewis Group. And they just had nothing but blues and roots music in that place, and they would pack it every night. It was really a cool time. But meanwhile, there were all these little bars on every corner. It seemed like there would be an Irish bar, but they'd have blues, and there's a little area of town called North Beach. There were 3 blues bars on one block. And we played all of those places. And, we would just roll my amp down the street. It had wheels on the bottom of it. And we'd play one joint on Friday night. And we'd roll down the street to the saloon, play Saturday night. We'd roll back to the middle and play the Lost and Found, And I knew all the bartenders and all the musicians. And it was just a lot of fun, And we wound up playing 350 shows a year without ever leaving town. We could play in either leaving town would be going across the bridge to Marin County, or going down to back down to San Jose, or going to Santa Cruz or Oakland or someplace from the city. But we had plenty of gigs right there in town, and it gave us a chance to work out. I mean, we were doing our favorite covers. I'm doing B.B. King and James Brown every night, entertaining the people. And playing what I loved, the artists that I really enjoyed playing their music, and eventually started writing some songs of my own. And Blind Pig came along and found me and said, "Hey, how many songs you got?" I said, "Oh, don't worry, I got a lot of songs." But I didn't really have that many songs. I had to start writing them. And yeah, that's how the San Francisco piece fit in. It really, every night, me and Randy and a couple other guys, the band changed members a few times, but we would gig every night, and that's how this whole thing started. I don't know if it would have ever got off the ground if it wasn't for that. That phase was very important.
Sure. Well, we're running out of time, and I would be neglecting mentioning your latest recording, Blues Man Comes to Town. something I find interesting. Could be
20 albums later.
well, there's something
And
about
30 years.
a blues artist in your life because you're going through all these ups and downs just like we all do in life. You're meeting these senior musicians, these mentors. You're transforming all these experiences into songs that are both true and fictional. I know on this album,
Yes.
but this one in particular just came out, and it's recently, like 2022 maybe. It's a concept out.
Yeah,
It's
21, I think.
21. So
September 21.
It was a departure, new territory for you.
A little bit. I mean, I really was just looking for a new idea. I like to make a different kind of record each time. I have all these different influences, and I don't want to make the same sort of formula album every time. You know, this is what Tommy Castro does. I try to push it around a little bit, and I get bored with what I'm doing, and I try to find some different things to do. So it gets harder. The more albums you make, it gets harder to come up with a fresh new idea. And I was having a conversation with somebody in my life, somebody very close to me at the time, and I was kind of trying to figure out what am I going to do next, And the idea of a blues opera came up. Has anybody ever done a blues opera? So it's like a rock opera. And the only reason opera comes into it, I think, is because it tells a story with music. So one song to the next is a piece of a story. And this song is about a young guy that finds out about the blues. He's living in a rural part of the country. His life looks pretty good to him. He's going to take over the family farm and marry his high school sweetheart. He's going to have a great life, but late at night he lays there thinking about something else. What else could he do? And one day he goes to a blues club and sees a blues guy play guitar, and it changes everything. And the story goes on and on and on about that. But and it did well for us.
There's a song on there, Blues Prisoner, which I really love. It's minor key. Reminds me, there's a tune by Little Ed and the Blues Imperials called Long, Long Way From Home. There's something about the minor blues that draws me in, maybe 12/8, I'm not sure, but it's got a certain feeling to it.
Well, the truth is, as every blues guitar player that I know, especially the rock blues guys, everybody does minor blues, and that's kind of like their big song of the night. Almost everybody I know, and so I've tried to shy away from that because everybody else does it, and I always did more, major key blues like B.B. King, Buddy Guy kind of stuff, not so much the minor stuff. And but it's been a long time since I've done a minor blues, and I thought to myself, to make this album a little different again, I'm going to do a minor blues this time. And it turned out me and Tom wrote that song, and I didn't realize just how it was going to feel, how good it was going to feel to me to play that minor blues. I mean, I just really connected with that sound. It was something a little bit different for me to do. And we play it every night now, and I really enjoy it. Pretty good song.
Well, it's a
great song.
lovely song on a lovely album, and I'm not sure. I know you have an interview coming up. I don't know if we could take any questions from the audience or.
Oh,
Tommy, it's such a pleasure to be here, man. You're a legend, buddy.
thank you.
I love what you do. I went into JJ's bar in San Jose and saw a blues performer for the first time in 2006, and
Wow.
the rest is history. I've been following the blues since. And I also learned about you with Gary Wagner, the Wagman, on Nothing But the Blues out of Long Beach. He plays your
Okay.
stuff all the time. And when I heard Tommy Castro, I said, hey, who's that? So thank you for being here. Just a real quick question. Sorry about
Sure.
the comment.
No problem.
You talked about Mom, right? And how you felt bad at one point that she had made this sacrifice for you. And he mentioned that the world benefited from that sacrifice. I was wondering when you thought Mom had felt compensated for that sacrifice. Did you ever come to a point where you said Mom felt like she had been compensated for making that sacrifice? That's the best way I could put it.
It made her so happy to come and see me play, especially when she got to see us have a little success, and she'd be if she could come to the shows. She didn't come to all the shows. She's old, she was approaching 80, say back in the 90s, late 90s, something like that. And she'd come to the show once in a while, her and one of my aunts or with a friend or my sister, and she'd be out in the crowd.
It's the blues, folks. Let's hear it for the people that are bringing something that's inside of all of us out to you in the world, because it's transforming, and it's an age-old art, and this man's been carrying it on. So
I'm doing the best I can. We're going to have some fun tonight, folks. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.